Good night. We are in Paris with a new set of talk, and Benjamin will present the talk tonight, so enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Hello everyone, thank you for being here tonight, and welcome to our two guests, Hansje and Français. I will maybe say a few things Jean-François already said, so you kind of ruined my introduction. Sorry. So for 4 weeks now, the students from typeparis try to brought their ideas to life in a way. So typeparis is about type design, drawing letters, but type design is nothing without graphic design. So the two disciplines are really intertwining, and okay. And tonight we'll have the perfect example of good design, whether it's type or graphic design, and the way everything overlaps, and we'll see ideas brought to life. So our first guest tonight is Hansje. You're from the Netherlands. You run your own studio since 2003. Your work is characterized by the use of pattern, colorfully mixed with type, almost in some psychedelic way sometimes. And it's full of optical illusions and really playful. Since 2017, you are the head designer of the Lowland Festival, cultural and artistic event in the north of the Netherlands. And you even received a prize for that, for this festival, for the design, just last month, so congrats. Last week, wow, congrats. And so you published your first font last year through Typotech. So please make a warm welcome for Hansje.
It's good. Hello, thank you for all being here when it's so hot. I think it's really funny that I'm here in this event where it's all about the hardcore type design, because I used to be in an art school where hardcore type design was the essential part of the education, and I ran away really, really fast to go to another art school and to discover that I really like type. But I would never call myself a type designer. I'm going to show you about 200 slides. It's probably way too much. I always have the urge to make things complete and to tell the entire story. And also I'm a bit of a collector. This is my studio. I'm located in Amsterdam. That's also where I studied. This is my wall where I put the posters or the sketches or the rejections. But this is actually how my studio looks. It's not so fancy and glamorous. It's more of a laboratory, a little attic with a pen plotter on the right, and some laser cut work and some book binding machines and coffee. And so this is my universe. This is the universe of my father. I think this picture is around 1983. I'm the one on the left, and the one on the right is my childhood best friend. And this is my father's studio, and he's an artist. He makes drawings. My childhood friend is 1 year older than I am, and she could already write, and I did not know how to write. So I actually remember sitting there, copying her letters, and asking her, like, is this one okay? Can you read it? And actually, that's what I still do. I still copy letters and wonder if people can read it. This is my father's work, and over the years, I start to realize that more and more my work starts to look like his. Not maybe on a literal sense, but the fact that he wants to fill the entire page is something that I also love to do. And I love the way that how he uses his lines, and that's something that probably embedded in my brain and became very natural for me to also work with lines. On the other hand, that was on the left. You see my mother in her younger years, and she works in fashion, and this is she's worked for the Dutch Opera. And it's not so much a sense of fashion that she taught me, but more about the fact that fabric has a texture. And she would teach me how to shop, not using my eyes, but just to touch the clothing and just stop if it feels good. So I think the lines and the sense of texture is really what are some essential parts of me. I became a book designer after school. That's something that I really enjoy doing. But also, on the one hand, it's the very practical sense, like somebody needs a book, so you make it, and there's a deadline. That's like all these boundaries I really like. But also the fact that you really make an object in the end. But also, I was a little bit bored in between the waiting for the client to give the feedback or the content. So I would start a hobby with drawing, and then I thought, I don't know what to draw, I'll just draw a letter. And that became a huge archive of unused material, which on a later phase I realized that I could use this material to make posters for my own initiative. But I'm going to take you back to 2002. That was the year that my graduation started. And when I was in school, I did, like when I grew up, there was always a computer, but not in my house. And so I really started to work with a computer when my school started, my art school. And for me, this computer was a dictator of making things straight and not being able to make it work the way I wanted to work. So the first thing I had was a scanner, so I could make a drawing and scan it inside the computer. The second step was a digital photo camera, which also made it possible to put material inside the computer. But when a nerdy roommate of mine said, hey, did you ever try the tablet to work with a pen? That was completely new. I knew one guy who used it, but we always thought he was crazy. And the evening that I used this pen, I thought, wow, finally my hand is inside the computer and the computer does exactly what I want. The thing I did was I had a piece of text, I made it into outlines, and I just scratched the insides of the letter. And it was not to make a type design or to think of any kind of design, it was just to test a tool. How does it work? To be curious. And because I did it in Illustrator, so it was vector, I could pick up all the different A's and look at them and think, hey, they're similar when they're small, but if you look at them large, they're very different characters. And for me, that was something that surprised me. And what also surprised me is when I piled up 50 different drawings of the A on top of each other and thinking, hey, but like in definition, they're kind of the same letter. 100 different drawings of an A, 150 and 200. And for me, that became a way of thinking about type, that it was not about light, medium, or bold. At that time, that was a new thought. Now, when we have variable fonts, that is not so surprising anymore. I went to my type design teacher, Gerrit who's a very well-known Dutch type designer, and told him, like, sorry, I did something with letters that's probably not allowed. I copied them. Am I allowed to do this? And he said, please continue. I think this is quite exciting what you're doing. This is one of the things I did with the scratch letter, as I called it in the end. And here I was mainly surprised by the fact that if you zoom in on a letter, you could see more and more detail, and if you zoom out, it just becomes a black dot. I didn't use the letter except for showing it in my graduation project. It was shown in an art catalog. But when I Googled my name, I found this book saying type design Hansje van Halem, and I thought, I did not know this book exists. Turns out that a year before, I had borrowed my Illustrator file with letters to somebody who wanted to make a test drive and forgot to say that he actually wanted to buy the letter. And for me, it was such a shock to see my letter, my type, being used by somebody else, and it looked 100% as if it was my design. So for me, this item was the reason that I decided never ever to share my letters with anyone. That if people want to use my letters, they should come to me and I'll design it for them. Or so that was my goal as a designer, to keep my tool for myself. That also had well, what happened from there is that I did not have to have the responsibility anymore to finish typefaces, to make it usable for other people. So most of my letters are just an Illustrator file, or sometimes an incomplete Illustrator file with somewhere in the margin the recipe on how I made it. So these are just some sketches that I would start in between deadlines, and then at a certain point a commission would come in, and I thought, I was already enjoying myself making this letter. Why don't I just finish it for this commissioned project? So that's how my practice from being a book designer shifted more towards being more more illustrating type. This is another sample that I made in between another project, and it was actually a sketch during designing the stamps for the Netherlands. I think these stamps were printed like 80 million times, which for Dutch measures that's quite a lot. Here I tried to make a dedication to Jan van Krimpen, who's a type designer from the beginning of the 20th century. I think that he made the most beautiful stamps of the Netherlands ever, and I used his Spectrum typeface for these stamps. And a little while later I was invited to do a second series connected to the first. And here my self-criticism was that the shape of the letter was really on top of the pattern, and I thought it was a bit easy. And here I made it a bit more complicated to have the letter have a zigzag line around the letter and then have the pattern evolve from there. So I thought that made more sense. This is also I'm just showing you to make the story run. This is a sketch that I made on how branches grow. And I think I've proposed it for 11 times for different projects, and it always gets rejected. But still, somewhere in the back of my mind, every time a project comes along, I'm thinking maybe this is my chance. But maybe it's just really bad design. This is some small printed matter, an invitation for an artist-run space, some contribution to a book. And this is a sketch that I found. I think this was the first time I was not using Adobe software, but I was using some skinning software where the pressure, the speed, and the direction of drawing was measured, and it was calculated into a texture. And also I managed to make a poster out of it. And zoomed in, it looks like this. I still don't know if this is is it a design that I can really say, oh, I designed it, or is it really nice software that I found? I have no clue. There was this one time I was in a museum in Brussels, and I saw this sample of a lace, and I thought, oh, that felt like a very big freedom of just making these decorative shapes, and also like the alphabet is really embedded into a background grid. Then I closed the book, went home, and for the first time decided to use fine liners instead of working with the digital pen. And I started to draw lace-like alphabets, with just a skeleton, the maximum X height, and started drawing. And I also scanned in the in-between versions of letters, so that I would have a light and a bold. And because it is a typeface, or it's not a typeface, it's an alphabet. And because it's a handmade alphabet, I thought it would be really stupid if you would have the same O on the same poster twice, so that you could see that it was actually a copy. So I made a lot of different variations for each letter. So here's the variations for the O. And this is a sample I made as a gift to people visiting my studio. And this is a zoom in of a poster where I thought, oh, I like to make these circles, so I'll also do the entire surrounding. Hours and hours of maybe useless work, I don't know. But this lace drawing really became an obsession. I thought it was this nostalgic feeling of wanting to be there and just drawing and thinking of this romantic lace. And I started drawing bigger things, and also computer manipulating it into more patterns. And at a certain point I thought, I have to stop myself, because this is nostalgia and not really the right thing to design for the rest of my life. So I enrolled in a bobbin lace course with the ladies from the church, and they taught me how to do the bobbin lace. I thought, I do it for 3 years, and then I'll be able to make my own big lace-made posters. This is homework from the teacher. It is, in real, it's this big. And here you see it on the left. It took me 40 hours to make. I think it's the most complicated thing I've ever done. On the right, you see what I can do on my own without the help of the teacher. And that was really a realization of maybe this is not really a good technique for me to follow, so I quit. Although I like the experiments. In 2008, I had moved my studio into my house. And the crisis was the economic crisis in the Netherlands was hitting us, so people lost faith in being self-employed, and I was sitting in my house. I had no more assignments, but I did have a little bit of money, and I had an intern, and I thought, oh, I have energy. What should I do? And a friend of mine said, hey, your cabinet in your living room is very beautiful, but you made a mess out of it. Maybe you should ask other people to rearrange it. And that's what I did. I asked my graphic design friends, like, hey, do you want to put your portfolio into the cabinet? We invite some people, we sell some beers, and have a party. This is the cabinet by Job Wouters, who I was in class with. He's I think, he draws type. Michiel Schuurman, who's also my best friend, he's a great poster and pattern maker. Victor Hagman, an illustrator. Nice de Vries. I think I had 9 exhibitions. About 1,500 people visited my living room. At the end, I still have to redo the floor. I'm kind of lazy if it comes to my house. And at a certain point, I was sitting on the side of my bed with like a dinner plate and a little TV in front of me, and I thought, I need my house back. And that realization also meant that the gallery started to make less and less sense, and I stopped the gallery, found used to be my house. It's now, I still live there, but it doesn't look so new anymore. But the nice part about doing this gallery is that for the first time I really had a purpose, because I had something to communicate. I wanted to have people come over to my house and show them the exhibition. So I started to screen print announcement posters. And these are all the posters I made, which in real have much nicer colors. And this was the first time that I was able to use my type experiments, use them for communication. So I was, I think, printing about 60, and I would cycle around Amsterdam and hang them in the cafes. And the nice thing was there was no client saying that it was ugly, or that it did not communicate, or that it was not legible, or did not show an image of the person who was in the exhibition. And in this way I could really create my own universe. I realized I started to become obsessed with having a background and legibility in the same layer, so not having type on top of a pattern. And it was super nice to... It really changed my assignments, because this was the first time I started to experiment with colors, with different texture papers. And this is the sketch. This is the 2 separate layers printed, and these are is a finished poster. After a while, as I told before, I gave up my gallery, but I enjoyed doing the poster so much that I offered my poster service to a like-minded gallery somewhere else in the Netherlands, and I continued the poster series as if it was my own. It was a client that paid for the printing costs, did not see the design before it was printed, and it was super nice to do. Also for them I made a nice large series. And after a while I did not have time to do the screen printing myself, so I switched to doing Risoprint. So the posters got bigger. It was not about doing the combination of colored paper with opaque ink, but now it was white paper and only 4 colors of ink. And I think that also all these technical aspects really changed the design, because you're trying to figure out how it works, why it works the way it works, and how to make use of the impossibilities of the technique. So this one I really like, because from up close it's just lines, and from far away it's type. At least that's what I think. Can you read it? There's another one. So this is just field of lines, and I manipulate the lines into legibility and using overlapping colors. And this one is an experiment using the Apple Pencil for the first time. So this is the series. To show you a little bit of my design process, because it's not that I think of a design, sit down and make it. I open a blank screen, I have no clue what to do. I type in the content in a kind of neutral letter, and from there on, I just start to make experiments. And there's a lot of failure involved, and there's a lot of ugliness involved, and this is a design process for a cover of a magazine, and I think this is the exceptional case that I had 5 full days of design time, which usually is not really the case. And here I just experiment until I think that something exceptional is happening. Usually I save in between phases also, that I think, oh, this is a nice idea, but I'm not going to use it maybe some other time. So this way of working also generates a whole new archive of possibilities for future projects. And sometimes on the screen it looks really nice, and I print it at 100% and it looks really ugly. You can read it too clearly, which I don't like, or you can not read it at all, and that's something the client doesn't like. So I always try to find this balance where there's this optical illusion that you think you see a letter and you're not sure it's there. Well, this is the end result, cover of a magazine, and from up close, it's just some lines. I like that. A couple of years ago, I was asked to do a type treatment for a logo. This is a logo for a literary magazine that's been there since 1870 or something. I had made it, and I had an intern who was a bit more clever than I was, so he made this letter come to life. And this was the first time that happened to me. It was like, wow, it breathes. Of course, what happens with interns is that after a while they leave. And at that time, I started to get emails with people, hey, can you make a moving logo for me? So I started to bluff and think, oh, I'll manage. It can't be that hard. And I had to reject a couple of projects. This is a project which is not so visible, but it will be visible. One of those clients who said, make a moving logo. After a lot of failures, I told them, I cannot make a moving logo. Here's the assignment. I'm going to quit this project. And they said, well, we want your design anyway, so make something static. It was Plus Design Gallery, and I thought, why don't I probably see it better here. I make a letter in one direction and a letter in a different direction and layer them on top of each other. 1 + 1 made kind of sense at the time. I made it into 4 directions, and then you can combine them in different variations and get all these different angles of type. And because I was supposed to have a long-running relationship with this client, I thought, okay, secretly I'm just going to make the entire alphabet, all the signs. And then the client never came back to me. So I had this type in my computer not being used for anything. So I started to use it for small projects. This is an invitation for a gallery. This is a gift for a friend who just had a baby. And then when Peter Bilak from Typotheek saw a presentation of mine where I showed this particular image, he contacted me and said, well, if you're already about to give the typeface to a client, why don't we make it into a typeface, a working typeface for Typotheek, and see what happens if other people use your work. I did not finish all these letters myself. I just explained them the system on how I worked on it, because the work I do is usually very systematic, very much about counting, and they made all these letters. So it's kind of not my type design, it's my type design system in a way. I thought that was very luxurious to not do it all myself. And then here on their website, you can try out how that works for you using different colors, using different directions. but also Peter Bilak surprised me with making it into a variable font, which I had heard. Well, it was new at the time, so this was launched in November, and it was launched a couple of days after the latest Adobe software was released, where you could actually use variable fonts. So this was super nice to have this tool being upgraded into something that I always had to. In the way that I design, I always have a lot of options, and I have to freeze it at some points. And with variable fonts, I don't have to freeze it; it's all implemented. So now you have all these nice things that you can do with it. Okay, back to the book design, because it has been a big part of my profession, and in some way it still is. As I told, I really like the making the whole object. Start to experiment more with the material and the color, and even do this very fancy 10 print runs of foil. On the left one is even one where there's the experience I have from screen printing used on covers for books. I started to collaborate with the people that I invited into my gallery. But also for book design, I found this little island of where nobody really cares what happens, and that's the end paper, so the first 2 pages from the book. And started making patterns. It always looks like very finished when it's done, but it's also like 3 days of non-stop making ugly failed patterns or computer crashes because it's too complex to calculate. But I really enjoy doing this, and I have a deal with the printer that I design the patterns for free, and he gives me a stack of printed paper. So I have like all this. As a kid, I would be in love with office supplies, and now I make my own. So that's like a dream come true. But at this moment, I'm not being asked for the book design, but only for the end papers. So people say, well, whatever, give the end paper, we'll do the book ourselves. So that's very nice. With the end papers or the patterns that I make, I was showing them around. I use them as office paper. I wrap gifts. I make booklets out of it. And that way, there was a group of architects who thought, well, if you can make this pattern, why don't you do it super big for our building? And that's really compliments to the creative client, because I could have never thought that would be one of the possibilities with my work. This is a perforation design. It was water cut, so every hole is identical. And I was a bit in shock because of the scale, like it was on my computer screen, and then suddenly it was super large holes, and thought, oh, that's going to be way too big. But I think it looks super nice on the building. It's the windows are, it's sliding doors for the windows to filter the sunlight. And what I like about it is that the texture of the steel is completely changed. And if you have one architecture project, then it's not so hard for clients to think that you can also do the second one. The square I designed for a church, also in the Netherlands. The path in the middle is a historical path from 1899. Here you can see it from above. And this was a process of only 6 weeks, like the moment that I got the assignment and the moment that it was actually finished. So it's a mosaic. And I think it's nice because the church already is very beautiful by itself, and to get an assignment to put something modern into this old-fashioned church is very exciting to do. This is a project that I did for an old Jewish area in the Netherlands. There was an assignment to design an entire poem of 60 lines into the street. And after a very long process, this is the design that I thought, this is interesting, because we thought of making a fence, and I thought, okay, every line is a baluster, and if I just change the shape of the balusters, then from a distance you'll be able to read something, and from up close it will just be ornaments. So that reminded me of these kind of staircases. So we made this, I think it's a 400 meters fence. It's about 6 minutes walk, so all the way through the fence. We did laser cut the design, and then it was painted and put in the street. And it's super close to my studio, so I cycle past it every now and then. It's a pity that it gets dirty, but it's not demolished yet, so... but it's super nice. This is a couple of years ago. I fell in love with my current boyfriend. His name is Willem. And I went to my studio and I thought, oh, Willem. And I couldn't care about working on assignments, so I just decided to make a W for him. I would never start an alphabet or a system with a W. And these are the shapes I made. I think this is the final W that was for him. And of course, being a designer, but also like business-minded, when a commission for a magazine cover came in, I thought, that was an interesting system. Let's apply it to this design. And there already the first surprise came, because the system that I used for the W was very symmetrical. But when I use it on non-symmetrical shapes, the system of, I think the rule is if a line hits the outline, then it turns inwards and then connects to the first line. It comes across and makes everything in between black. And I really liked this irregularity. That was really a surprise. Like the Q, for instance, I could never imagine making a Q looking like that. But it was just a system telling me this is how it's supposed to be done. So I like that. I did quite a few projects with this type system. At a certain point, I was approached by Lowlands. It's a music festival in the Netherlands. I remember being 13 years old, and that Lowlands was on the radio, and I would sit with a cassette desk taping the concerts. I went there a couple of times as a teenager, and in my 20s I also went there. So for me it was this very well-known big brand coming to me, and I thought they wanted maybe a flag or something, and then they said, well, we want you to do the entire identity, which was a surprise because they only had one designer in the 24 years before. So they're very loyal to their designers. I think these are some... But the thing is that usually a big brand would have a pitch or something, and they just decided, we want to work with this designer. And we did a test run for 2 days. I designed for them to just show them how I would approach an assignment like this. It was not supposed to be a final design, but just a way of taste or something. So here are just some samples of things that I designed. And I was mainly thinking of, okay, I'm going to design for a festival. I cannot make it too complicated because I'm not able to reproduce it like for every advertisement or every small thing. This was one of the sketches I made, and I told them, let's not fall for this one because this one cost me 4 hours to draw. I also showed this series of sketches to a programmer called Joost van Rossum. He's a programmer and a type designer. And especially for this sketch, he said, okay, how did you make it? So he was asking me all my rules, so every step I make in my head. And he said, I think I can do something for you. And he used Python in Drawbot. And Drawbot is an educational programming program, is that the word? And this is my current design environment. He made a very elaborate master script, and I just work with the parameters of that script. And if I hit run, then I get images like this. And for me, this saves me 3 hours of work, which is really amazing. To explain a little bit about the system, my rule is that the inside of the letter becomes, in this case, horizontal lines. The outside of the letter becomes vertical lines, and where they intersect, they get combined. So here we have the letter. Here we have the letter translated into the system. And because it's parameters, you can also animate the parameters. So we can make variations on the stroke width and the stroke height. And for me, this is magic. Well, after 2 years, I'm a little bit used to it. We could play with the curves. And the position. And what I really like about this position is that it's not like a static image that moves left or right, but if the letter that goes behind the grid, all the connections are recalculated. So I think that gives it like a bit of a clumsy look, but I like that it's so that it makes sense. We can also play with the grid size. So here we've changed the grid height, and here are some samples of different variations that come out of the same system. So I thought, well, we're finished. We have a system, we have a machine to make it fast, we can animate it, and then the real life started, and the real life was that it had to fit on Instagram. And if you scale this for Instagram, you get blurry letters. It's just not pretty. So all throughout the year, we had to make solutions for the problem we created ourselves. One of the solutions was that we made a static font, an open typeface for a little bit bigger use, and a solid typeface for smaller use. And that's easy because also people from the festival can easily use it. For animations, this is an animation we made that I still think is very intriguing. This is all coded. And after a while, I thought, I can also put in vector images, and I started to make shapes move, and I thought, interesting. And then I think even in Keynote, I would like place the clip and then flip the clip like this. I thought, that starts to look like patterns. So I went back to Just van Rossum and say, hey, can you do something that we can make this easy? So he adapted the script, and then we had a new set of options. So we could make stuff like this. And then I think we started the festival thinking, okay, everything is going to be black and white. And then the first question that comes is, can you make 15 different stickers? You can only use one color, and we have to be able to identify them from a distance. So there goes your black and white world. So we started to use color a little bit more, but it was always hard because it was lowering the contrast. We also made the drawbody rendered wristbands, the coins, the program posters, advertising. And the nice thing about this is that the client did not say, okay, if you make something in the beginning, it has to look like that in the end. We could just evolve throughout the festival, especially because it was the first year, so we did not know what problems we would encounter. Here are the t-shirts, which I think were very... And the signage. The signage is the most visible at the festival, and it was the easiest to make because the whole identity was based upon making these large type. And we even made a huge festival tent, which is now the icon of the festival. So that's super nice to be so visible as a graphic designer in this festival. And as backdrops for acts, here they use the static font. And everything I showed was for 2017, and now we're in 2018. Next month the festival will take place, and it's like the 3 days where I can see what we did for the entire year. But the goals for this year were to use colors in a better way than we did the first year. What I also realized is that I'm not such a good animator, and I had seen the animations made by Jurian Hos, so I asked him, like, can you do something with these set of rules? And I actually gave him more or less free space. I think I only said do something kaleidoscopic and something with two colors overlapping and making a third color. So he made these amazing animations for us, which is a super nice collaboration. We even on the website we have a script that runs if the client goes and put in a new act, we have a script that runs a movie and that it gets placed on the website. So that's super nice. That has some interaction also, and more animation and patterns. And this year I thought, okay, the first year was black and white, so this year This year, I think every time there's a new announcement, we make it into different colors. So we have these kind of Instagram films. And Facebook buttons and advertising. Well, just to mention the people that I work with, because this is the first time that it's not a me project, but it's an us project, is myself, Just van Rossen for programming, animation design, Jurian Hos, and design assistant Marjolein Rinkes, who's really putting a lot of things to the table as well. Currently I'm, actually at the printers, a book. It's called Theory of Type Design by Gerrit Unger, who was also my teacher, who I asked if I could copy letters or if it was wrong or not. So I'm currently working on a very thick book about type design, and a little bit more about the patterns, because I think my time, I have 5 minutes. 20 slides, 5 minutes, I can take it easy. The thing with the patterns is that I don't get asked for book designs anymore, but I get asked for doing the patterns. And this is a pattern that is reprinted every year. And it's the printer, who's also a publisher, every year he picks different colors, and I have no idea what he's going to pick. And every time he surprises me, and it's still the same design, just by mixing the layers. And I thought that was so nice, and at a certain point, well, the thing with patterns is that I don't like one pattern, I like the combination of a lot of patterns, because I think, well, that's nice. And I got the opportunity to design an installation for a museum, and I figured that I would just paste every part of a wall in a different wallpaper, and that's actually just the end papers blown up to this size. And it used to be the toilets of a university, so there's a lot of small spaces, so I had a lot of opportunity to make a lot of different tiny walls. But because I like printed matters more than just like the inkjet printed wallpaper, I asked the printer, like, hey, can we reprint all the patterns we have used together? And he saved all the printing plates over the years, and he reprinted my patterns in colors he picked. And at a certain point he called me and said, Hansje, maybe you should drop by, because I think your book is almost finished, maybe you want to add something. So I took home like a big stack of one-sided printed paper, and then I designed the back sides with some type specimens. And these books, well, this one, I have it in, and usually I would say, and it's for sale, but it's at my address it's sold out. I think some bookshops still have it. It contains 28 Pantone colors, 11 different paper types of paper, and it was super nice to work on this. But it's already my third publication. I tend to make books out of my sketches and failures. I think I'm almost there, yes. Well, that was the exhibition. What I'm currently doing is, tomorrow I'm going on a holiday for a month, which is very luxurious but very needed. And when I get back, I'm going to finish a design for the entrance of a building. So I'm dreaming of doing tile design. And when I'm on holiday, it's being produced. I was working on the design of a 3-dimensional door for a museum. This is the rejected design. But then the rejections always leave me with some nice patterns that I can make more elaborate in the end. And that was my talk. So...
Only 14 years after its birth, the iconic Bauhaus School of Design was shut down by the Nazi regime. Many treasures and unfinished masterpieces were left behind, lost to the world. Founded on the central idea of training a new generation of artists to create a better world, Bauhaus laid the foundation for modern design as we know it and changed creativity forever. But in 1930s Germany, the progressive ideas of the Bauhaus were considered threatening, and the school's closure became inevitable. But sometimes, what's been lost to history can be brought back. The influence of Bauhaus lives on, and now you can design with a piece of living history.